Okay. So, vulnerable moment, everyone. Welcome to yet another LinkedIn Live with Mark Stabina. I normally have my guest hidden. I do the big intro. Jason and I were chatting away. We did all that. I forgot to press live. So, look, here we are 5 minutes late. Thank you for your patience. If you've been in the waiting room waiting, I will reintroduce Jason again. I'll embarrass him by having him on screen right now. So my guest, as you can already see with me right now, has 10 plus years of HR consulting experience. He started as an actuary and then led the health innovation team for North America at WTW, 2+ years as an AI tech startup in Boston. That's where he's calling in from right now. You can see by the exposed brick, very fancy. And he started Electives, which is why we're here. We're going to talk about Electives. He started 3 years ago with his classmate at MIT Business School, MIT Sloan, Krikor. We're going to talk more about that. And Electives recently won the Corporate Learning Solution of the Year in the EdTech Breakthrough Awards, a fantastic achievement. I'll let Jason explain more about how Electives started and what their mission is, what they offer. Jason, welcome again for the second time for me, for the first time for our guests.
Well, thank you again for having me. Looking forward to the conversation, Mark. I know it'll be a fun one. So for quick context on why Electives, why did we start this company a few years ago? I'll speak from my own personal experience and then how Krikor and I kind of put our brains together at MIT and got obsessed with this question of how do you build corporate training that people love? So on my side, personally, I had this really painful corporate training experience a few years ago where we watched a lot of videos. We took a lot of quizzes where it felt like the multiple choice answers were pretty obvious. And there just wasn't a lot of learning. There wasn't a lot of human connection with your peers. And so it felt like a very flat kind of check the box type of experience. And while we were in school, we were getting exposed to just really interesting, not only professors, but guest lecturers from all different backgrounds and perspectives. And one stood out to us one day. He happened to be a mountaineer. He had led 7, I believe, expeditions up Everest, which at the time I had no idea how grueling and challenging that actually was until seeing the photos and the videos. But he was teaching decision-making in teams. And the frameworks were not only powerful, but the storytelling was captivating. And it was just a reminder for both Krikor and me of how great a learning experience can be when done really well and when it's done in a human and authentic way versus, some of the trainings that I was experiencing that just felt like, don't make me do it and I'll do it because I have to do it. And so that set us on this journey of probably months and months of just interviewing HR leaders and chief people officers and heads of learning and development and trying to understand the corporate training market. And I think the two things that just resonated for us thematically across all of those conversations in the early days was, number one, a lot of people would tell us that they had libraries and libraries of videos, on-demand content. And they would always finish those sentences with, but none of our employees really watch it. And so there was this desire for more live, interactive, virtual learning. So that was bucket one. And then bucket two that really stood out to us was we started asking people, how do you find a good corporate trainer? Is there an Expedia or kayak.com version that you can go to? And it turns out there wasn't. And more interestingly, everyone would describe their journey to find a corporate training class basically going on LinkedIn and searching like corporate trainer sales or corporate trainer implicit bias or corporate trainer fill in the blank. And to us, we thought back to that mountaineer at school and we just thought there are so many other people in this world that we could be learning from who probably don't put the term corporate trainer in their profile. And that became this really kind of interesting spark for us. So fast forward today, we have about 200 instructors on the platform. They range from former professional rugby players to FBI agents to Broadway performers to astronauts to high school principals and everything in between. So we are big believers in building, training people love, but also change who we get to learn from on any given day basis.
Jason, brilliant. And you gave me away. You blew my cover. Full disclosure. This is how I know Jason Lavender, people. We met toward the beginning of this journey of Electives when you were wearing 10 different hats. I joked with Jason beforehand that, wow, this is the only way I get to see you now, because in the beginning, it was always Jason. It was Jason. He was client facing. He was always the one recruiting and having these discussions with potential teachers. And now you've just blown up so much, which is totally understandable. And now I have to deal with Jason's cronies, and they are great cronies as well. So this is a privilege for me right now. But we were introduced by a mutual friend, connected by Miriam Glares at Athlete Soul. She's doing fantastic work over in the athlete transition space. She knew the two of us. She knew what we were up to, what Jason was looking for, what I also was looking to do with my career, put us together, thought we'd be a good match. And we absolutely were a great fit. I love these discussions with Jason. I pick his brain all the time. And I'm so fortunate and honored to have been invited to be one of their early adopters, I guess, as a teacher. And I'm not going to plug that right now. I'm just going to say this is how I met Jason. And 3 years later, just as you said, over 200 teachers. I mean, you've really exploded, and it's a credit to, as you said, the research that you did and just asking people the question, right, about corporate learning. I think there's so many misconceptions about the best way to train your people, like you said. So I think you really articulated that perfectly, and this is why you're here. I think it's a great opportunity for the entrepreneurs out there and other founders to learn from you. Having said that, what have been some of the main challenges so far on your journey?
Yeah, I think that, just for the founders who are out there, I think every day is a challenge, and that's a good thing. It just means there's opportunities every day. Mm-hmm. And I think the challenges have just kind of ebbed and flowed. They're always different. They could be, in the early days, hiring challenges. They could be fundraising challenges. For the first year, Crecor and I just bootstrapped everything. So it was the nerves of just kind of, are we even going to be able to pay our instructors for the classes until we get paid by our clients? So the challenges, come and go, and they're all different. And the good thing is, as you're growing, you get introduced to new challenges. So those will always be there. I think for us, the thing that we always think about is we operate in sometimes what we call a three-sided marketplace. So we have the instructor side of the marketplace, and we always want to be recruiting and meeting new instructors. But of course, we want them to be busy and have opportunities to teach and do the things they love. So at the same time, you have to manage the demand side of the marketplace, which is typically HR leaders, people leaders, DEI, L&D leaders. And as we bring on new client partners, there's a good matching process there between instructor and client. The third side of our marketplace is the end learner. So the employees at the companies who are actually taking the classes. And what's interesting, I think, for the most part, there's good overlap between what the organization wants and what the employees want. But there are times when the employees are asking for different types of content, different types of personal development needs that the organization may not be prioritizing with all the other things that they have to do. And so we want to make sure the learners are happy and they're getting exposed to content that both personally and professionally can be relevant to them.
Yeah, for me, I think that is really what sets Electives apart from traditional corporate learning. You mentioned those off-the-shelf videos that are 10 to 15 years old that they require, it's a required learning and they don't really watch them. This way, you get to really focus on the pain points of that specific and particular organization and the growth stage that they're at, which is so special. Okay, thanks for that, sharing some of the challenges. Makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about, I mentioned before Electives were awarded the Corporate Learning Solution of the Year. Fantastic. Congratulations. What can you attribute that to?
Ooh, great question. I would say the first thing is, when we first set out to build the company, we wanted to change how we learn at work and who we get to learn from at work. That was a big question, though, and a big hypothesis that other people wanted to learn from a lot of different perspectives. It intuitively felt like it made sense, but we had no idea. So that first year was all testing. We wanted to know, do people like learning from all these interesting perspectives? Do they find the instructors credible? Are they engaging? Is there a learning outcome? All those types of questions. So that whole first year was a big test. And we saw in the first year, our net promoter score was in the mid 70s, and the typical corporate training average net promoter score is -8, which is a sad kind of state of the market. So we knew early days that there was likability from the learners. So I think that was one big part of the success. The other thing, and I share this line a lot, but actually one of our teammates, Hannah, joined us from an L&D background. She's on our learning experience team now. And I will never forget, but we were interviewing her last year, and I asked her about the future of learning and development within companies. And her answer was, the future of learning is content curation, not content creation. And she said it in such a smooth way that it just clicked. But then after I kept digesting it, I was like, that feels totally spot on. And I think the perspective that we had early days was, teams of learning and development leaders are being asked all the time for new content. Like, with new generations entering the workforce, with just new things happening in the world, it is very hard to keep up with actual delivery of that content. And so how we've positioned ourselves to be a partner for HR and L&D teams is, we'll help do that sourcing and vetting and partner with you, so you can teach the classes that you have that expertise and that kind of control over. But to the extent you need to find some external partner, that's where we fit in. And I think that's led to our success in terms of, some companies can kind of turn that nozzle up and say, we got to really, turn on manager training this year. And other times they can turn it down and say, you know what, we got to focus on a different part of the business. And I think that flexibility and that curation focus has helped differentiate us.
Absolutely. You mentioned some of the content which might give us a clue into some of the trends out there in the world of organizational culture. So what are you noticing, Jason? Which leadership topics, organizational culture topics are in most demand?
Yeah, I would say the first bucket that we hear most often is new manager training. And there's a lot of kind of subcategories that fall into that. But I think the combination of a lot of really high performing individual contributors getting promoted into a manager role for the first time, and typically managing a team that's remote, that is not an easy ask. You were great at that role, and now all of a sudden you're managing 6 people, and that's a tough ask for a lot of folks. And so a lot of classes around giving feedback, managing skill versus will, how to have difficult conversations, how to motivate, inspire, all those in that new manager bucket are pretty prevalent. The second bucket that's I would kind of say sadly has been a trend is mental health and well-being has really started to just get requested quite a bit on our platform. And one of the chief people officers I was talking to the other day said, everyone's just having different types of trauma in their life over the last 2 years. And it's, whether people are talking about it or they're not, it's really hitting employees pretty hard. And so no matter what the class is, we want to try to make a space to have those conversations and make sure that there's learning types of resources that employees can tap into.
Adding to that, you obviously started, you said 3 years ago. What happened in 2020 in the world? I think we all know. And as a result, a lot of these trainings, actually, I'll ask you, what percentage of the training you offer and the lessons and electives you offer are virtual, like this right now? Because we had to shift, didn't we? And I feel like, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but that might have been also a great opportunity for you and electives of virtual training is not great. It's new for a lot of people. How do we make impact with our teaching and our learning on screen, when it's not in person anymore, when most companies went remote. So some companies, obviously, they're coming back now out of the pandemic doing live trainings. I know for a fact that you offer that, but how much of it still is online?
Yeah, I'd still say about 99% of all of our classes are online, but all delivered live. So we are truly optimizing for live, interactive, virtual experiences. It is funny. All of our client partners will say, like, can we record the class just in case, a couple people want to watch it? And then we both kind of admit, it's much better in the live setting. So we'll typically just run the class again for folks who can't make it rather than watch the recording. But I think the big learning for us was we knew intuitively that live interactive learning was more engaging than, being by yourself watching videos. But I think the reasons why surprised us, they're probably obvious in hindsight. But I think for us, we initially thought, it'd be great to be able to ask the instructor questions. Like, that was part of the big hypothesis. You can't ask an async video instructor any questions. So that feels like a big plus. And it absolutely is. But I think the bigger part is just the community that you're in class with other people. You're in breakout rooms, you're laughing, and there's like a feedback loop in the experience. And for a lot of our content, people are struggling, in their role as manager, or people are struggling, in some other capacity. And for them to see their peers nodding along and also being vulnerable, saying, I'm struggling too, that is a big part of learning. Like, you don't feel like it's just you. And so there's been so many kind of pluses to optimizing for live, and we'll probably die on that live learning hill.
I might be putting you on the spot, Jason. Apologies. Right? And this could come across controversial. No, not really. I've certainly noticed as an electives teacher, companies and their on-screen or video on versus video off policies, if there even are policies. It varies. I want to get your thoughts on the video on, the benefits of video on versus video off. Every company is different. That's a challenge that we at Electives face and have to navigate. What can you say about, I'm just going to say, video on versus video off? Go.
Great question. There's probably three different perspectives I have. One, it's always helpful for the instructor to know which way beforehand, because I think if you come in expecting 40 videos on and you get 2, that just kind of throws you in terms of ways to engage people. So having that expectation, I think, is huge right off the bat. The second thing I would say is my strong preference, even I'm not an instructor on our platform, but I've, even when I'm talking with our team, like it matters from a human perspective to be able to see faces. So I have a personal preference for video on. That being said, there are certain classes where we've had, really good learner feedback of, could be a super heavy topic and they just want to kind of sit back and not have the pressure to be on camera. And that totally makes sense. We actually have a class where they intentionally turn all the cameras off and they name everyone the same name. And so even when you're dropping in chat, you're fully engaged. And the instructor does such an amazing job of, it's one of the most engaging classes, but you're completely anonymous, even though you're in a live setting. And it's just based on, the topic that she's talking about. She wants to, keep people in a safe, private space. So they always depend, but I prefer live just because I like to see faces, but there's always some circumstances that would lean more towards video off.
Wonderful answer, Jason. Well done. Got out of that one nicely. And you offered some really good insight, because I'm with you. My personal preference, and I believe that we can achieve most impact on, and we're having meetings all the time, right? In corporations, a lot of meetings, a lot of Zoom. There's Zoom fatigue. It's real. So sometimes it might be nice for someone just to turn their screen off and listen and feel more comfortable that way. That's the tricky balance to strike, because I honestly believe that with our cameras off, as you said, as you pointed out, It depends on the message we're trying to deliver. And more often than not, the message I like to deliver has everybody tapping into the collective, like facial expressions. We're talking emotional intelligence. So the laughter, the connection that you can create, seeing everybody's face, I feel just heightens the experience. And as you pointed out, it's great that you added that because, well, it depends on the experience we're creating. But I always try, and you're right, meeting with the clients first off, gently encourage videos on, but also having the empathy and understanding that that might not be the best solution, and also accommodating in that way. But it is, I've always found it a tricky one, and thank you for your insight into that. And hopefully those that are watching and listening take that on board as well, and how you can even conduct your own meetings to make the most impact. There's certain tools you can learn on Zoom. One that I learned, which was fantastic to avoid Zoom fatigue, is you can actually, if you even use Zoom, I know people use Teams and they use Google Meet, but there is a function on Zoom where you can hide self-view. Because I think a lot of the time, Jason, that this Zoom fatigue comes from people having conversations but they quite often find themselves looking at their own image and then maybe feeling a little self-conscious. That's why I think a lot of people like to have it off, so they don't have to worry about the judgment of what people are seeing. And I always encourage people to not worry about what people think, and practice not worrying about how you look or how the background looks or what people might think of you. But I also understand. But hiding self-view, all of a sudden, if I did that right now with you, I would only see you. And then I'm only focusing on you so you can be more present with the other person. And the way I explain it to people is, if you're in a coffee shop having a discussion with someone, unless there's a mirror behind them, you're not looking at yourself constantly and then looking at them and looking at yourself. So that's what hide self-view does for me. It's a little hack out there for you people. I highly recommend it. Any other tips or hacks that you might suggest just with people having meetings and how to make them more impactful?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like, so we kind of stumbled into this early days, but some of our early instructors just were playing music at the beginning of their session. And that energy was so impactful. And now it's become a tradition for almost every electives class starts with some kind of music. And I get it. I think it makes sense. Like, there's that awkward moment of everybody joining and, no one's saying the first few words. But if you come in and there's music playing, it just kind of pulls people in and welcomes them in a unique way. The two other things I've seen work really well. The first type of question that gets asked is really important. So I think we all default, you and I may have just done this 30 minutes ago, of talking about the weather. And you have that same conversation like 40 times in a week, and it slowly kind of sucks the energy out. But one of our instructors will do fun questions like, who was your favorite teacher growing up as a kid? Or tell me about a time you and your best friend got into some trouble as a kid. And just by thinking of your favorite teacher or one of those best friend moments, you start to smile. You're just a bit more present by having those memories. The only other thing I've seen recently is getting people into breakout rooms within the first 5 minutes. So people tend to come off camera when they're in groups of 2 or 3, and then they actually just forget and they come back into the main room and they're all on camera. And so that combination of music, a thoughtful question, and a very early breakout room, within 10 minutes, people are pretty highly engaged.
Wait, I'm writing this down. Hang on. This is great stuff. I will say, those kind of tips, another feature of Electives as a company, and why I'm not surprised by your success, is the constant work that your team are doing behind the scenes to elevate any of the teachers, always providing these kind of tips that you just gave then. What are some of the things we're noticing that's working with other sessions that you can maybe bring on? So you're offering constantly teacher training, I guess, if you can look at it that way, right? Let's discuss, let's share some of the learning hacks, some of the tools. If we use Zoom all the time, what are some of those functions that you might not have thought of that can really elevate your experience? So again, another hats off to Electives and your team. By the way, how many in your team now?
A little over 30. Yeah.
Wonderful. And over 200 teachers. Speaking of which, Jason, we'll start to wrap it up. We've had long conversations before, but I know people are trying to get back to work, perhaps, as you are as well. So I just want to say, for those of you who are thinking this LinkedIn Live might be, a shameless attempt at promoting electives, and specifically my workshops that I teach on electives, you're absolutely right. So electives, go to electives.io, check out their library, and of course, look for my name. You can see it on the screen, electives.io. Jason, anything that you can say, any words you can offer to a company perhaps looking for some impactful corporate training, some learning, or indeed someone that might be looking to be a teacher on the electives platform?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start on the company side and then pivot to the instructor side. So I was telling you right before we started that I think I've had about 40 different kind of market research conversations over the last 2 weeks with different HR leaders, people leaders, and just trying to understand where is learning and training and development moving today. And there's been a bunch of interesting insights. I think number one, for HR and people teams, they don't have a lot of resources, both from a headcount perspective and from a budget perspective. And it feels like they're just being asked to do 100,000 more things with less and less resources. And so one thing that we've been trying to help our client partners is truly develop the learning strategy, because the easy thing to do, and I think we're all humans and we get caught up in this, is like, I heard something, so let me react to it and let's do one class and hope that solves that particular pain point. And of course, we know it won't. There needs to be multiple classes, and managers need to be involved, and everybody else. And so taking that breath and actually building that learning strategy up front has been a huge, it's been very impactful to the broader learning experience and learning culture. The second thing I've heard from chief people officers lately was this fantastic line that 3 different people said it. And I don't know if this is like a line that everybody's saying now, but it was new to me. But in this world where it feels like every business is focused on revenue, they all said, you cannot grow the business if you're not growing your people. And that really stood out to me as like, we have to invest in our people. It's bigger than just a retention thing. It is truly, you can't grow as a company if your individuals who are powering all of that are not growing. So that's the advice on the employer side, is take the time to build the strategy. Always happy to kind of just ideate and brainstorm with you, and really invest in people before it gets too late. On the instructor side, I'll share a couple things. One, I think almost every instructor we talk to has a little bit of imposter syndrome in those first few minutes. There's always that, like, am I really an expert? Am I a good facilitator? And our learning team could not be, more thoughtful in terms of feedback and helping coach, et cetera. And so we do believe everyone has a story, and it's just a matter of unlocking that story and finding a way to deliver it. So that's one piece. And then the second piece.
So I have the opposite to that problem. I'm like, I think I'm an expert in this. And thankfully I have your people to say, I don't think so. So keeps me grounded. Thank you. Carry on. Number 2.
Yeah. Number 2, I think, is just adapting with the times. Like, so going back to the content curation side of things, the class, Mark, that you initially crafted 2 years ago may need some tweaks and some edits, and the content may evolve, and the class title may need to evolve, et cetera. So there's always just kind of a conversation that we have in terms of, let's all keep pace with the current trends and let's meet people where they are, so that we can create learning experiences that people love.
Fantastic, Jason. So best way to get hold of you, should people want to get hold of you or your people?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. And my email is jason@electives.io.
Perfect. I'm going to put that up. Jason, thank you. As always, I always feel smarter after speaking to you. And I mean that, my friend. Congratulations on everything you do. You really are changing the world of corporate culture and organizational culture and teaching and learning. And it is, once again, an honor to be part of your electives journey, and look forward to many, many more years. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. And thanks for kind of being an early adopter in the early days when it was just two of us and we were trying to find new people who could help teach employees. So I appreciate you.
All right. Well, get back to work. You've got some more magic to create. All right, Jason, take care.
Take care. Thanks, Mark. Thanks all.
Well, hope you enjoyed that, folks. Thanks for joining me. I see we had Zach pop in with a little LOL, Monica as well, another teacher for electives, by the way. Spoiler alert. Remember that name, Monica D. Livingston. I'll explain why later. And Lindsay, thank you for checking in as well and your comments. Expect more of these, folks. Still learning the platform. As I mentioned at the start, Jason and I were talking for a good 5 minutes and I forgot to press live. So, but this is great. I highly recommend LinkedIn Lives. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your Thursday/Friday if you're in Australia. And we'll see you for the next LinkedIn Live.